Good morning, algebra students. It is Monday, April 13th. Let's get back to work. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to take a break from the textbook for just a second because what the textbook covers and how they cover it is different from how I would do it. So I thought I would give this a shot. There is a worksheet that is attached to this as well in the classroom. You do not need to print it out, as I've mentioned. However, if you have a piece of paper and a pencil and just want to write things down, that would be great. Otherwise, graph paper would especially be good because this is what the worksheet looks like. So let's get to work. So recall from before spring break that we were looking at this picture that reminded us all of the different realms of algebra. Today we are going to go from the equation of, in this case, a line, to its graph. And we're just going to do so using what I like to call T-charts, that is looking at the x value, finding out what the y value is, and then just plugging it in. See how it looks when it goes from symbols world to picture world. So let's look at number one. Number one says, well, so for all of these, it's scan the graph of each line. We've got 4x plus 4 equals 0. So as I said, I want us to make a little T-chart like that so that we can see exactly what our different x and y relationships are going to be for each of these. Then think it to yourself, how many points, what is the minimum number of points that I need to make a straight line? I hope you thought 2. So in this case, let's hedge our bets and let's look for 3 points. And I usually like starting with, 0 and 1, and like easy points. We certainly are going to want ones that are between -6 and 6 because that's where we are in the graph right here. So how about we do -1, 0, and 1. So I'm going to write -1, 0, and 1 there for our x value. And then we're going to find out what our corresponding y values are. So for the first one, I'm going to write 4, instead of x plus y equals 0, it's going to be 4. Notice I write parentheses and I plug that in. -1 plus y equals 0. So that becomes -4 plus y equals 0. Now how do I move this -4 to the other side? And for those of you who love the curtain, we can certainly put that in there. We do the opposite of it. The opposite of a -4 is a +4. So y equals 4. Once we get it to some form, y equals a number, we're done. That's all we got to do. Okay, let's try it again. This time it's going to be 0. Well, what is 4 times 0? What's anything times 0? 0. It disappears. So that becomes 0 plus y equals 0. Well, 0 plus y is just 0. So that's easy. It's just going to be 0, 0. And then finally, we've got, I'm going to do this one over here just so I can note that we have enough space later. And I'm going to plug in 1. So that'll become 4 plus y equals 0. And then here it was -4, so we added. Here it's a +4, so we're going to subtract. And that gives us y equals -4. So now let's look at actually graphing these things. So this gives us 3 different points. So another way to look at these is like so. -1, 4, 0, 0, and 1, -4. So let's see. Starting with this first one. And you don't need to write them like this. This is where we call them ordered pairs. But for those of you who are super familiar with those and less familiar with this, it's just another way of looking at the exact same thing. So -1, 4. Well, -1 on the x-axis is right there. And then +4 on the y-axis goes up there. 0, 0, well, that is the origin. That's the world's most famous point. And then 1, -4. Well, there's 1 on the x-axis and -4 on the y-axis. Connect the dots, and there we go. We have now created a line. And I'm pretty sure we did it right, because in addition to using 2 points, we put a third one in there to see, all right, does it continue in that same pattern? It does. Great. We're good to go. Alrighty, let's try. I'm just going to do 1 point from number 2 and a point from number 4, and I'm going to set you off on your own. So for number 2, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Sorry, here's number 2, and I'm going to say my x and y, and how about we do the same thing? Let's just be consistent. Note, we might get some fractions in here. That's okay. We might get some decimals, things like that. Don't worry about it. Just when you graph it, 2.5, for instance, is halfway between 2 and 5. We'll just go with it and see what happens. We'll learn other ways to graph this later. So let's see. -1, I'm going to do my 10 instead of x. It's going to be a blank. Minus 3y equals -15. And then let's plug that in, -1. So that becomes -10 minus 3y equals -15. Solve for that. So plus 10, cross out, -3y equals -15 plus 10 is -5. Then divide both sides by -3. Why divide instead of add? Think to yourself for a second. Because we're multiplying. Yes, there's a negative there, but we're actually multiplying. So then we divide both sides by -3, and we get 5/3, which is really close to 6/3. Let's see. So in terms of thinking about what this is going to be as a decimal, it looks to me like it's going to be 1.67. Really close to that. And you can figure that out also by just putting that into a calculator or your phone or something like that. So let's write 1.67 for now. It is 2/3 of the way between 1 and 2. So now, let's see, -1 and then 1.67, right there. And we're good to go. Then do the same thing with 0, do the same thing with 1, and you'll see wherever this graph goes. It could be something completely different from this first one. Also, note, I was writing on here so that you could see the examples with the worksheet there. I definitely recommend that you use lined paper or graph paper or something to show your work, because it will make it a whole lot easier, and especially for those of you who struggle with neatness, that will definitely help with that. Finally, the one last example I want to help with is number 4. This one says x equals 5. Okay? Well, already I'm panicking a little, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to set up my regular x and y, and let's see, -1, 0, 1. Wait a minute. This isn't going to work. It says x equals 5, but here I've written x equals -1 and 0 and 1. Those aren't 5 at all. If I were to plug in -1 for that, that'd say -1 equals 5. That don't make no sense. So I'm going to have to erase those. Instead, x is always going to be 5. In which case, let's look at this. Do you think it matters at all what our y is going to be? Because if our y is going to be, I don't know, 1 or 0 or -1 or something like that, regardless, x is always 5. So let's see. X is 5, y is 1. X is 5, y is 0. X is 5, y is -1. Oh, look at this. You may recall from earlier in the year that we remembered that x equals 5 means a vertical line at x equals 5. This is how we've just demonstrated that using a t-chart. Alright, by Friday, please have this worksheet 1 through 12 completed. We've already done 1 together. I must see work for all of these things, and if you have questions, please see me in my office hours every day at 1 o'clock. Thanks so much.